welcome back inside the Now Morning Show. Of course, we're broadcasting to you live from the Hyatt Regency, where we get ready for the regional symposium on the violence as a public health issue, the crime challenge. It's being hosted, of course, in Trinidad and Tobago over the next 2 days. And this morning, we're kicking things off, and we have with us a gentleman who's here to discuss the impact of crime on the business community in Trinidad and Tobago specifically. I'm talking about Mr. Jason Roach, who is the immediate past president of the San Juan Business Association. He's also the CEO of Roach Marketing and a director at Langston Roach Industries. Good morning to you, sir.
Hi, great morning.
Welcome to the Now Morning Show. How are you doing this morning?
I'm great this morning. I'm very heartened by what I'm seeing taking place here over the next 2 days. You know, the governments are coming together, put their heads together to really come up with a strategy and a solution to this issue of crime that has been plaguing us for so long. So I'm really excited about.
Now, I know recently you would have made calls for heightened police patrols and increase and things like that, especially in your area, which would be the San Juan business community, especially after the Chinese descendant was recently killed, the Chinese businessman in San Juan. So what do you hope comes out of this symposium?
Well, coming out of the symposium, I really hope that we do develop a framework, right? Obviously, the minister before me would have mentioned some of the discussions that will be taking place, you know, to really draw from ideas that may be working in other countries, as well as what might be working here, and we'll be able to share these ideas to really come up with a plan, right? That will be effective in terms of how do we deal with the issue of crime.
And the action plan is set to come out of it, so we look forward to that. But let me backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
In your experience, how has crime affected the business community?
Well, it affects it in a very serious way. I mean, let's face it, if you lose your life, you can't carry on your business, right?
Fair.
Right, but deeper than that, you know, when your customers come to your business, they really have to feel safe. Your employees, your key employees, they have to feel safe, right? And when things like robberies happen, you know, it really instills a fear. You know, people may not want to come to your business to do business because it's a risk. So we really want to have an environment where everyone could go about their daily business and their daily lives safely. You know, this is what we really want.
What do you think contributes to that level of crime happening where people don't feel safe running a business, where you don't feel safe because if you go to a business you might get robbed, that sort of situation? What do you think got us here?
Well, I'm no expert on the issue of crime, right? And there are many factors just from the symposium alone, and when you see the amount of different stakeholders from the judiciary to social welfare, you know, it's a lot of things apart from the economy that can affect crime. So really and truly, you know, the business community, as the business community, we really have to get a sense of comfort, you know. Is the state really looking after us? Are the institutions operating the way that they're supposed to operate? And when it is I go back to the issue of the home invasion in San Juan, one of the key things in that story that really jumped out to me would have been the neighborhood watch group, right? And this is something that's very simple but effective. And this is something that is very active in San Juan. This is about building a sense of community, and I think that is one of the things that we have lost over the years. We want to bring back a sense of community, you know, where we could talk, have discussions. Something might be bothering one business, and we could put that out there in a group. Even if something happens, you know, there's access. And in this neighborhood watch group, a police officer would have responded to the call, right? And we know that they would have called the police and they couldn't get through, right? And that informal group went a long way in terms of apprehending some of the perpetrators.
Yeah. What role do you think the business owners play in adding to this community spirit that you're talking about, this community effectiveness?
Well, it's social responsibility, and this is one of the 4 words in entrepreneurship now. You have to have a sense of social responsibility to run a sustainable business. And when we talk about social responsibility, we talk about getting involved in the community, getting to understand the people who live there, right? and also employing people from your community. When it is you do that, you really they look out for you, right? And too often, some people take the approach where they believe they could run a business and really stay away from the risks and the factors. But the reality is that we live here and we have to really get involved and engrossed in this sense of community and how we go about living.
One of the things that I always hear that's, it bothers me to some extent, right? You hear people from particular communities saying that when they go to apply for a job, for example, they don't put their actual address. They find another address somewhere else because the minute people see certain addresses on your resume, for example, they immediately cast it aside and say they're not hiring you. Do you care to comment on that firstly?
Well, it's a stigma, right? But let's face it, hardworking people can come from any community, whether it is affluent community that is well known, or whether it is a community where crime is happening, right? The brilliant people come out of Laventille, Beetham, San Juan, right? So I don't want to get into a narrative of discrimination and
well, it's not the narrative I'm trying to push. I'm saying that this happens, right? Or it's alleged to happen. But do you think that contributes to the crime that happens as well?
Well, I wouldn't say it contributes, right? Really, because if it is you are hiring people from constituencies or areas that have a high level of crime, obviously you would be concerned, right? But I don't think it should discredit or eliminate or stop us from engaging and hiring people from these communities, because they can make a meaningful contribution to your business.
But I wonder, in terms of not hiring, you don't hire them. What happens to these same people if they're unemployable? For example, if it is that people are unemployable simply because of where they're living, is that an issue that we should be focused on, and we should be trying to figure out how the business community can change that perspective?
Well, and that is part of social responsibility. So if it is we believe that a person may not have the relevant confidence, right, to go into the job market, you work with them and you coach them, you build them, you send them, you give them training, right, and build them, right. And also there are other programs that are involved. It's not just the business community as well. There are other support programs that can go a long way in preparing people for the workplace. For one, for instance, is the Empower program that the Ministry of Sports is currently embarking on. I would really like to see a program like that scale up, right? It really instills confidence, right? It really gives people the life skills necessary to go into the workplace and make a meaningful contribution, right? Because what we want is strong characters, right? From the primary school, secondary school, coming out of university, we want people to really get us a good sense of appreciation and instill that confidence into them, so that when they go into the workplace, they could really make a difference.
So education, from what I'm hearing you saying, that education is a big factor when it comes to moving forward, not just the formal education, but the informal education, the trade, the everything else that surrounds self-esteem boosting, all of those things that surround education as well.
Yes, it is.
How do you propose that we go forward dealing with crime? Or is it that preventative measures is what we need to have? Or do we just say scrap everything that we have now and we start over? How do we go forward?
Well, they're primary, secondary, and tertiary level in terms of how it is, the strategies that you adopt, right? As the citizenry, in terms of the private sector and businesses, what we could focus on is the primary level, right? In terms of simple things, your rights, the laws that protect you and govern you,
right.
Even something as simple as an FUL, possessing a FUL. How do you invest in technology, CCTV cameras, right? These are the kind of things that we could take responsibility for, right?
Do you, just to pause you there before we move on to the secondary and tertiary, the FUL, I want to just go back to that a bit. You mentioned that, is it that you think that would be a solution to the crime situation?
It's not an easy fix, right? Because with the thing with FUL is that as citizens, we have a right to protect ourselves, right? And one of the things with the FUL business, we know they've been racketing in the past.
Racketing everything.
Racketing everything, right? And that has kind of shed a negative light on it. What I am saying is that, yes, I would advocate for it, but obviously you have to have responsibility. Yeah, you have to be trained. And I believe if it is, we can focus on policy, on how we bring structure to this whole FUL matter, whether it is requiring FUL holders to have training every quarter of the year to maintain that permit, even attaching a holder's tax, right, which can raise revenue, right, and that will also be able to finance other crime fighting strategies for the community. So it can't be that we just throw our arms up and we don't know what is taking place with applications. We have to really get proactive, right, and look at the framework from policies or even strategies in terms of how we could make this possible, but do it safely and responsibly.
I wonder if the challenge is the policy or if the challenge is actually the implementation of the policy.
I think it's fair, right? It's fair because let's face it, you do hear the stories where there are FUL holders, right, bringing harm to themselves, right? And that has to do with training.
Right.
But when we talk about training, it's not just training about in terms of how do you operate and handle an FUL, a firearm, right? When it is we talk about training, we're talking about self-awareness. How do you monitor a space for your safety? How do you position yourself?
And how important would your mental health be in that situation as well?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Right.
I just want to go back before we wrap up. You mentioned, we mentioned just now to have racket and everything, right?
Yes.
Does that play a role in the crime situation in Trinidad and Tobago today? Because if it is, I am an unemployed person seeing these big businessmen running racket, as we like to say, then how am I motivated to do any different, to do any better?
Well, the reality is that we have a lot of corruption in the country, right? At many levels, right? But I don't think we could let that believe us, right? We have to really have a situation where we can feel confident, right, that the state agencies and people in general will do the right thing, right? We have to have confidence in our people.
I hear you. Confidence is the message you want to leave it with today. Mr. Roach, I want to thank you so very much for joining us this morning and for sharing your perspective. I know you still have a little bit you wanted to discuss about pepper spray and self-defense and things like that.
Yeah.
So tell me about the pepper spray initiative that you're supporting it.
Of course, right? That is a non-lethal weapon that can go a long way, right? That can help women protect themselves against rape and domestic violence. I would really like to see that come into place as well, but it goes back to the framework of providing citizens with different strategies and mechanisms that they can adopt to protect themselves. That is the key issue that I wanted to point out, right? And coming back to this pepper spray thing, right? When it is you talking about FULs, you also have to talk about that, right?
Just equally important, you think?
Yeah, it is, right?
And the training for both of them would be equally important as well.
Exactly, right? Because little initiatives like this, right, could go a long way in terms of supporting the police as well. When it is you have a community that is acting responsible, right? In terms of taking up assets, firearms, pepper spray, that they can do to foil crime on their own, right? This is something that should be welcome.
I agree, it should be welcomed. My concern is, as we mentioned before, we have corruption everywhere. So how do we stop that from becoming corrupted as well?
Well, we hope some strategies come out from this symposium that can address that.
And that's what we're here to discuss for the next couple of days inside the Regional Symposium on Violence and as a public health issue, the crime challenge. Mr. Roach, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Do enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope that you're able to attend the conference and enjoy and get some fruit out of it.
Pleasure is mine.
Yeah, man. All right, guys, we'll take a quick break and come back with more on the Now Morning Show. Please stay tuned.